Welcome back everyone to the Fusion 360 tutorials. In this video we are going to learn how to do sweeps and revolutions, two great tools for creating geometry that would be otherwise almost impossible to create using conventional methods that we've learned up until now. You'll see on my screen I've already created some sketches in advance to save some time in the tutorial. Go into those a little bit more in detail. But the most important thing to remember here is in order to do a sweep, we need two things. First, we need a sketched path. That is the path that our profile is going to follow. Second thing we need is a profile. So we're going to have to sketch a profile. So the profile is going to be what shape that do we want to follow along our sketched path. So zooming in or looking at the top view of this, I have this first sketch profile. If I go in and open up that sketch, you will see it's nothing more than circles and radiuses. And I have fully constrained this. So we can constrain these just like any other sketch, and they should be constrained to maintain any design intent. I also have this sketch profile here. So this is going to be a little bit different, but we're first going to go into this simple one. So I've sketched on any plane. You can sketch on any plane for these. In this case, I have sketched on the XY plane. So here is our path. I've sketched that. I've shown you the sketch and how I've constrained that. That is nothing more than just simple lines and curves. And that's the path that I want my profile to follow. So the first thing we need to do after this, after we've sketched our path, is to determine what our profile shape looks like that's going to follow this path. So we do have to sketch that profile on the path. It has to be part of that path or has to intersect with that path. How do we do that? What we're going to do is we're going to use our geometric construction tools up here, and we're going to go down to put a plane along a path, because currently we do not have a plane to sketch on, but we need to sketch one. So I've selected that option, and I'm going to select this path here, and it puts my plane right on the end there, and you'll see my distance. This is like a ratio. So if I went 0.5, that would be change this value to 0.5. That would actually go halfway through that profile. So that's about half the distance of this length. So I'm just going to leave it at 1 for now. We could also use a physical distance and put in the exact value. So I'm going to leave it on there. And now this is going to be my plane that I'm going to sketch on. So it is right on the end of that path. So I'm going to select OK. So now I do have my sketching plane, and now I can create my profile. Go up to my create sketch and select the plane I just created. And for this example, I'm just going to put a simple circle on there, and I want to constrain that as well too. And I will add a dimension on there. I'll put a value of 2.5. Finish sketch and look at our isometric view. So you will see I have a profile now and a path. So with my profile and my path, what this is going to do is it's going to take my profile shape here, and it's going to act like an extrusion, and it's going to follow that path that I have created. So I'm going to go up to my create menu, select sweep, and first thing it's asking me is for my profile. I actually want to make sure that this is just a single path for now. And the first thing it's asking me for is a profile, so I'm going to select profile. And it doesn't know if I want to select more, so it's kind of just waiting for me to put some more inputs. We've only got one profile, so we have to tell the software that no, we've selected it all. Let's go to the path now. So going to select the path option there, and once I select that path option, you will see that it has actually followed that shape around there. So if I finish that, select OK, now we actually have a nice, almost looking like a paper clip, but there's our profile that actually followed our path along our sketched profile. So just as a refresher, we need a sketched path and a profile, and our profile has to be on that path. Our profile does not have to be round. It can be any shape as long as when it's going around those bends that it actually works geometrically. So if I went back to my sketch here and I wanted to change that to a different shape, I'm going to delete my circle and I'm going to select a rectangle, and I'll put my rectangle on here. And I'm not going to fully constrain that for now. Keep things moving along fast. And now you'll see an error in my my highlighted sweep down here. So just going to go reselect that missing profile. I'm going to select my new profile, and it has changed to square. And we could actually put a twist angle on there, make it a little bit interesting. Let's say if we wanted to actually, as we're going through the path, we could have this rotate. So if I change this to 720 degrees, you're going to see that that square eventually twists a total of 3 times around 720 degrees. Kind of a unique feature. You can experiment to play with that with different shapes. Get some pretty interesting shapes by using that feature. This next sweep demonstration is very similar, where we have a path. I've drawn a path here in advance, and we're going to put a profile on there. But I have added this line in here. You're probably wondering what that is. That's what we call a rail. So it's kind of going to help shape our profile a bit. So once again, I'm going to go up to construct, plane along a path, and I'm going to select that, the end of that path there. And now I have a plane to sketch on, create sketch, select that plane, and I'm just going to select another circle here. I'm going to put a circle on there, and I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. And I will dimension that to constrain that. We'll go with 5 millimeters on that. So now looking at our isometric view, we have our profile and our path, the two things that we need. So when I go up to my create and select my sweep again, I'm going to change this from a single path to a path and a guide rail. And it's asking me to select my profile, and it's asking me to select my path. So I'm going to select my path, and then I'm going to select my guide rail. My guide rail isn't constrained, but it does actually just direct that shape mathematically the way I have sketched that spline in there. So if I select OK, that one is complete. If we look at the top view, you can see that there is some bulging and some shrinking that is actually following that path. And if we look at the front view, we will see that it stays the same shape, circular shape all the way through. But I do have some options in that sweep command. So if I go up to edit my sweep command, double click on there, I could change my scale. So this is an even, it's like a proportional scale, or I could stretch this. So that is going to stretch that. And it does follow the same profile looking at the top view. So you'll see the same shape at the top view. But when we look at the front view, you can see that it has kept that vertical distance, but in the horizontal shape there, it actually is stretching it in that direction. So maybe look at a little bit of different angle there. So the vertical distance is maintained all the way through, but the horizontal distance is not. So if I went back to this option and changed this to scale and a distance of or a value of 1 there, you'll see it is round all the way around, perfectly round. Back again to my scale and select stretch and select OK. Pull this aside, select OK. And actually you couldn't see too much change there, but the horizontal distance has changed, but has maintained the vertical distance. So as a recap for our sweeps, 2 things we need: a path for something to follow, and we need to create a profile or a shape that is going to follow that path. On to revolutions. Revolutions is a little bit similar to the sweeps. We do need 2 items in the revolutions. We need not a path, but we do need a center line and a closed sketched profile. Center line can be an existing center line, can be in a construction line, it can be a sketch line, but we do have to identify a line in a center for something to revolve about. So a circular revolution implies circular. So if you have something circular, you need a center line in that. Just going to quickly demonstrate a few things on here to highlight the revolution feature. So I'm going to create a new sketch here. I'm in a sketch mode here. Actually, I'm going to get out of that sketch and delete that one, and I'm going to create sketch. I'm going to use my vertical axis there, my z-axis, as my revolution. So that's going to be the center line through my object. So I'm going to select this plane to sketch on. If you were choosing to sketch on this plane, then you would use your y-axis as your center. And likewise, if you were sketching on this plane over here, that would be the same. You'd be able to use that same axis to rotate around there. So I'm going to sketch on my XZ plane. And my axis that I wanted to use, my z-axis, is not visible, but I can turn that on, make sure that is on. And when I go to create a sketch, I am going to go create project. I want to use that axis, so I'm going to use my project, and I'm going to use my Z plane just so it's there, because I'm going to need to reference that a little easier when I can see it. So I'm going to select OK, and I'm going to select a shape. So I'm just going to select a circle shape. Very simple circle shape, nothing fancy, just to demonstrate how the revolution works. I would constrain that as normal. I'm not going to add those dimensional constraints in this tutorial. So I do have, looking at my sketch isometric, I have a circular profile or sketch profile here, and I do have a center line. Only 2 items I need. So I can use my revolve here, or I can go to my create menu and use the revolve there. Select that, dialog box pops up, and there is only one profile, so it selected that by default. If you had more than one profile, you may have to select that. Next thing it's going to ask me for is to select an axis, and I want to select this axis because that's the axis that I want it to revolve about. So you can see that this is doing 360 degrees around that axis. That's why we need an axis to revolve about. We can change this angle. This might help you make it a little bit clearer. So I've changed this to 180 degrees. So starting from my profile, it has gone counterclockwise 180 degrees. We could swap this to go symmetrical, 180 degrees, both sides, one side, 2 sides, and we could put another value in there of, let's say 45 degrees. So that will add 45 degrees in the other direction. And we also have symmetric. So if I went to change this to 45, it would go 45 in counterclockwise and clockwise direction. Just going to change this back to 360 degrees and one side, and select OK. And when we rotate that around, we have a donut shape. Now, we do not have to have a circular profile in this. Using the revolve as well, you can revolve any shape. So I'm just going to change this back to, I'll change this to a square. And I'm going to delete this circle and finish our sketch. It's going to give me an error because I changed my profile. So now I can select my profile. And now we have a rectangular shape rotated around my Z-axis. So there is my Z-axis looking down at that. Very important to notice that it's rotating around that axis. We can make some interesting shapes with this. I'm going to go in and edit this sketch again. And instead of creating a simple square, I'm going to create a shape that creates an enclosed feature. Now we have to remember that it is going to be rotating around this axis. So in our profile, we kind of have to think about how that axis is being used. And once again, I'm not going to constrain this, but I do have a closed profile. And I'm going to delete this feature here, right click, select delete, create my sweep, and where did my feature go? I'm going to go back there, undo that. Going to edit my revolution. I'll have to finish my sketch. Edit my revolution and select my profile. That's my closed profile, and you'll see it's rotated around there. It's actually created a cup. So back to our previous work when we've actually created the cup using a couple different methods, using extrusion, using the shell. We also could have made this using a revolution. Just to demonstrate this, I'll change this to 180 degrees so you can see our profile. Look at our sketch profile there. That is the reverse L, and it is rotating around that axis 360 degrees. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that rotation works, why our axis selection is important. And I'll finish this off at 360 degrees. Select OK, and isometrically we can see that nicely formed shape that may be a little bit quicker than adding some using extrusion or shell commands. Just going to save that feature, and we could go add our radiuses on this just using our fillet commands if we were going to go back to that cup style. This is a very pretty simple shape. I'm just going to demonstrate how you can get some pretty creative shapes out of that. So going to go into my sketch profile here, and I'm going to change that to something a little more creative. I put a base on there. That means when it rotates around this axis, it's going to be solid all the way along the bottom. If I wanted a little hole gap on a little hole at the bottom, I would not want to touch that. I would want that line to be separated from there. So I want mine to be completely filled at the bottom when it rotates around. And I'm going to use my spline command here. Control point spline, and just roughly put an interesting shape in there. Okay, and then I'm going to offset this shape. Actually, I probably want this to make this a little, I'm going to put a little horizontal line on there, because I do want this horizontal at the top. And I'm going to use my offset command on here, and I want it to go negative 0.5. Let's go negative 0.5 millimeters. And then I'm going to trim this off. Keep this flat at the top. Draw a line across here. Use my trim command. Don't want that feature. So I've trimmed that off. Once again, I could constrain these. I'm not going to, just to keep the tutorial quicker. And when I sweep that through, you will see that has created a pretty unique shape. So pretty quickly, just using that spline command, I was able to create a fairly unique shape. Go into there and going to change this to 90 degrees so you can see how that shape was rotated. So there's my profile, and you can see how it is starts off 0 and it creates that rotation all the way around. Almost a little bit of an illusion there, so change my direction there, and now you can see how that profile uses that center axis. Finish this off 360 degrees. And we could continue to add more features to that if we wished. One last important point that I want to show is in our sketch profile when we are constraining our sketches with revolutions. If we were to add a dimensional constraint on there and we wanted the bottom of this cup to be a diameter, if we had just selected this point and that point. That's going to give us a dimension in there. I'll change that to 5.5, keep it simple. If we wanted that to be a diameter and not this distance, remember we want to maintain design intent. So if we want that to be identified as a diameter, when we select our dimension command, select our two items, and then we're going to right click and select diameter dimension. So that is now our design intent is maintained. It's more proper to show a diameter on something round than a dimension from the center line to the edge. So demonstrate that at the top. Select my axes, select my other point up there, right click, diameter dimension, and I put the diameter dimension in there. I'll make that nice and simple, 9.9. So that concludes the sweep and the revolutions. This will enable you to create so much more geometry that you would just not be able to create up until now using the learned techniques or fundamentals we've learned so far.